Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the GEB America podcast. I'm your host, Dave Groves, and we are so glad to have people joining us from all over the globe on all the different platforms. Thank you for being here. I want to say a special thank you to Our True God and OurTrueGod.com for select apparel that we, matter of fact, this hat today. And so we appreciate them. We also appreciate the folks at Angel Studios. Don't forget to sign up for the Angel Guild. So today we have a very special guest. This guy's been all over the place. I've seen him on everybody's podcast. I finally get him on ours, and that is Joshua Broome joining us from the great state of Texas. Joshua, how are you? The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the speakers and not necessarily those of GEB America, Oral Roberts University, or their employees. This program is not intended to offer investment, financial, medical, legal, or any other advice. Viewers should consult a subject matter professional regarding any such matters.
So good to be here, man. I'm great. My heart's full. It's like I just got back from Israel, and everybody was like, there's every reason in the world for me not to go. I almost didn't get to go, but man, I'm glad I went.
I love it. I know that we talked in Dallas in February at the NRB, and we talked about getting you on the podcast, and we're excited because you've got some really great stuff happening. We're going to get to that, but for those that are not familiar with you and don't know your story, take us through really the transformative journey where God really called you out and called you up to something that he had designed and destined for you to do on this earth. And so tell our listeners and our viewers about that.
Yeah. So I grew up in a small town in South Carolina. My mom got pregnant with me at 15, had me at 16, and my dad was around the same age. And what was unique about my story was that, fatherlessness is not, it's not a new thing. It's unfortunately a normative thing in our society. But for me in the small town, not having a dad in your life was not normal. And especially when he's across, essentially across the street, down the way, just a few miles away in this small town. And growing up, as a kid, just understanding, the attachment theory. So attachment theory, simply defined as we find ourselves to be most needy in our unmet needs. And for me, I had the desire and the need to have a father, and being able to be in physical proximity to him, and day by day, week by week, him not be, malicious towards me, but choose not to choose me. It impacted, my understanding of who I was. And just as a kid, when something that doesn't make sense to you, you have to make sense of it. And the way I made sense of it was there must be something intrinsically wrong with me. So maybe if I become enough and earn enough and, win enough and achieve enough, maybe then and only then I would be enough. And that was the mission that I set out on, and became a good student, became a good athlete, was, an above average basketball player, started modeling acting when I was like 12, 13, and had some success with that. And then around 13, right before I turned 14, I saw pornography for the first time. And, average age of exposure 3 years ago was 11. It's trending towards 8 years old now. And, your prefrontal cortex is the thing that's impacted. Like when you consume pornography, and your prefrontal cortex, that part of your brain, it regulates emotions and it controls impulse control. And, an 8-year-old, that part of your brain's only around 40% developed. And that's the part of the brain is actually damaging. And I just share that all to think, man, when we see something like that and we don't understand it, and we have shame and we hide it, and the thing that causes us shame, we strangely gravitate towards, and you end up in this cycle of consuming it over and over again. You're literally rewiring patterns that are inconsistent with your original design, and you're damaging the part of your brain that allows you, not just to not watch porn. It damages the part of your brain where controls anger, controls appetite, controls urges. It's beyond this thing that Paul talks about in Romans 7. Like, why do I do the thing that I don't want to do, and I find it difficult to do the thing that I want to do? Well, that's the human condition. That's called sin, but it actually amplifies that part of our brain that allows us to be resilient. We see in World War II, there's an example of there being mass pornography consumption, and chaplains came in, and it was actually the pornography that was a problem. And the people were the soldiers. They weren't being resilient. They didn't want to. They were being selfish instead of selfless. They didn't want to go into harm's way, and it was actually the pornography that was diminishing their thinking. And the pornography was removed, and all of a sudden they became the trained soldiers that they were there to be. But for me as a kid, I see this, and then I start thinking, man, I'm seeing this stuff on these pages, and I'm like, well, maybe if I experience what I see, I'll feel what I don't. And what I mean by that is I felt overlooked. I felt not chosen. I felt unworthy. So I created this narrative of, man, if I became sexually active in consuming pornography and being promiscuous with women, I thought, well, that would feed some kind of emptiness in my life. And, that led to nowhere good. And that behavior continued throughout college. And I studied theater and had opportunities with acting and modeling. And I had representation in Hollywood. I moved there, had a really great manager, had the opportunity to train at the Improv in LA, and life was good. I had, great place to live, friends, all the stuff. And then I was at a bar, and at that bar, there was 3 girls who were headhunters for the porn industry. And essentially they would go out on Friday and Saturday nights looking for attractive guys and girls. And they would ask them, hey, would you ever consider doing pornography? And when I was asked that question, it was really perplexing, because just the way that pornography works, because you start to commodify people. It doesn't, like, porn doesn't teach you about sex. It teaches you about objectification. It teaches you consumption. And it kind of like crosses your wires, in that we're supposed to love people and use things, but all of a sudden you learn to love things and use people. And it was like, my world it becomes so abstract that when someone said, hey, do you want to do porn? I was like, that's a real thing. Those are real people. Those pixels on a screen are actually people, and you're inviting me into this place that I thought was some kind of like weird fantasy. Sure, I'll check it out, I guess. And in my heart and in my gut, I knew it was a terrible idea. Growing up in the South, it's like I had a mama that would, like, I knew if she got wind of that, she'd karate chop me in the throat. Like, it was I knew, like, logically, it was a terrible idea. Yet I didn't have a good reason to say no. And logically, I was like, let me just check it out. And I had pre-decided that, if it was a weird situation or a sketchy dude, then, I would just hightail it out of there. But the way that Satan masquerades a very dangerous thing as a not so bad thing is that it's, a counterfeit never looks dramatically, this genuine, in that he presented himself to be a traditional agent. He had a traditional agency, and he asked me, hey, how did you grow up? What are you doing in LA? And what do you hope to accomplish? And I think that question in itself, the first question asking me, how do I grow up? Essentially it was a value proposition. How can I extract information from you so that I can manipulate you to get you to do what I want you to do? Mm. And I wasn't aware of that. I was just, 22 kid, nervous. And I didn't really think much of it. I was like, just grew up pretty much me and my mom. I'm in LA trying to succeed in this. I have the desire to tell stories and be creative, and however I can do that, I want to do. And I guess I want to be famous. And when I said I wanted to be famous, he knew what I meant. I didn't mean that I wanted to chase after this passion that I had and develop talents around, being excellence in my field and create great things and strive, to inspire people. What I was saying was, I feel overlooked. I feel not chosen. And I feel like if I have what the world does, if I have what other people who look happy, if I have what they have, I'll feel what they do. So I feel empty right now. So maybe if I become famous, I'll feel seen. That's what I was
Yeah.
saying, and he knew that. And he was just like, "Yeah, you'll be the guy. You'll be famous. You'll make the money. You'll win the awards."
Mm.
And and again, in a way, he wasn't lying in that I became famous. I made millions of dollars. I won tons of awards. I did thousands of movies, but along the way, I understood and really knew from the beginning. Number one, this is not what I want to do. It's not even what it sounds like. It's you know, it's invasive. You're exposed in a way that you were never meant to be exposed. You have this you take something beautiful that's supposed to be intimate and sacred, and you create this commodity out of it, and you objectify yourself and others to the extent where you've suppressed reality, and you don't even know the difference of what's real and what's not. You're dating people in the industry, and you're saying that you're in a monogamous relationship while you're both having sex with other people, and it's such just a strange world where you have to suppress reality so you
Mm.
can function. And then the duality of you feel ashamed for what you do, but because of what you do, you feel like you can't do anything else. So you're stuck in doing what you do because what else am I going to do? And that's really the narrative that's built around the industry, like the producers, the directors, the belittling, the chipping away of people of, who are you going to marry? What are you going to put on your resume? What else would you do? And it's just, the embedding of this idea of, um, this is not something you've done. This is who you are.
Mm.
And if this is who you are, how could you change? Because you can't change who you are. This
Yeah.
is what you're worth. This is the
It
only
really an eroding of your identity.
100%. And I think to your point, it's, the agent was like, I'll make you famous. You'll make all this money. You'll be the star in all these movies. What name do you want to go by? Because they change your name. Because if you remove, uh, if I can remove an aspect of my humanity, I will believe that there's no repercussions. There's no consequence of my actions. And in a way, it's not truly me that's doing it. And you see this with gang members, with homeless people, even in, some like, subsets and groups and stuff, you'll end up going by this, different persona that,
Mm.
that's not really indicative of who you are. And in the porn industry, it's like, hey, you're going to go by this different name because it'll be easily to manipulate this variation of you. And in my story, that person became so much of who I was that I didn't hear my real name for almost 2 years towards the end of my career because that person just overtook who I was, and I stopped receiving calls from my mom because I would I stopped answering her calls and texts. She never stopped calling and texting me. I just stopped answering, just because I believed that I disqualified myself from being her son. And truly, I mean, it was selfishness and pride, but I really believe that I couldn't change. And in just the way that accountability works, it's like, if someone truly loves me, what are they going to say? Dude, what are you doing with your life?
Yeah.
My mom over and over again is like, you're better than this. What are you doing?
Yeah.
So if I believe I can't change, the only way I can silence those voices is to push them away. Because that was the only two choices. It was either change or push them away. And I didn't believe I had the capacity to change. And, um, you know, in that industry, I was like, well, if once I eclipse $1 million earned, I'm going to feel some sort of way.
Right.
And it didn't work. And then, there was an award, Performer of the Year, which is essentially your peers in all the studios vote you as the most, prolific person like in that sphere. And I got nominated for that award 4 years in a row. And I thought, like, man, if I ever won that award, if I was ever chosen to be like the guy that would solidify, who I was, and that would mitigate the deficit that I felt. And in 2012, I won that award. And when I won the award, I held the award in my hand, and it didn't make me feel the way that I thought it would.
Mm.
Crushed me.
Wow.
Because I put so much, I invested so much in that feeling or that presumed feeling that when it didn't work out the way that I thought it would, anxiety that I already had amplified, depression that I already had deepened. And I thought, man, if this isn't going to fix me, nothing will. So what's the point? And I quickly started making a plan to end my life.
Wow. So you're at the top, literally, in that sphere. And you mentioned this when we talked in Dallas earlier in the year, that what should have been at the point of your life where you were making the most and doing the most and getting all the accolades is when you felt the most just depressed and lost.
Oh yeah.
And,
I mean, it's like you look at my life from the outside, it's like, I was being paid to be at bars and clubs in Vegas and flying all over the world. And, to age myself, I was like, DVD stores, like signing DVDs and stuff like that. And, that show, it was on Showtime. So, the year that it was shown live on Showtime, like I won the biggest award for a guy in that industry. And just this whole deal of, man, if you, like, so many people were looking at me and like, man, you're the man, you're the guy, you're awesome. And it's like, well, I don't feel like it.
yeah.
And I was just thinking, like, man, if in the pennant, like, this is as good as it's going to get. I'm making millions of dollars. I'm having sex with women for money. Everywhere I go, especially like in Hollywood, Vegas, stuff like that, like people know who I am. I have this like level of notoriety, and I've never felt worse or more alone. And in a very strange way, in retrospect, I believe it was in God's mercy. And thinking about like Romans 2:4 talks about His love, His kindness, His patience that leads us into repentance. I think in a way, God allowed me to experience everything that I thought would fix my life, so I would realize it wouldn't.
Wow. Yeah.
It was, at the end of the day, all of us have the same problem. The greatest problem that we have is sin, and the only solution is Jesus. And I essentially had to come to the end of myself before I could find myself. And, in that moment, I didn't have the guts to take my life. I tried multiple times. I didn't have the guts to do it. And I had this really beautiful interaction with a bank teller where she just simply, I wanted to deposit a check, and historically I hadn't done that because the memo on the check was clear what I was being compensated for. And historically I would, ATM, Dropbox, anything other than hand it to a person. But on this day, I wanted to hand her the check, and I wanted her to read the memo, and I wanted her to agree with me that I was disgusting, whatever. I wanted her to be in agreement with me so that it would give me it would be catalytic in me harming myself. And she didn't do anything. And then I began to weep because I'm like, what am I going to do now? And she came around the corner and put her hand on my shoulder and said, hey, how can I help you?
Wow.
And I think it's I like to think of that similar narrative in Acts 16, where there's the jailer, and, the Paul and the disciples were, doing all these incredible things. They were, baptizing people and casting out demons and all this stuff. And then, they had cast a demon out of someone who was essentially, being used to manipulate people to earn money.
Right.
And they were like, hey, you're messing with our money, you're messing with Rome. And they threw them in prison. And while they're in prison, there's an earthquake, and all these jail cells open up, and the jailer knew that, capital punishment was the expectation, because he had one job, to keep people that were put. And then he sees all the doors open, and he's like, man, I'm going to just do this before they do it to me. And he grabs the sword and he goes to end his life. And Paul just simply says, hey, don't harm yourself. I'm right here. And that's what I heard from her lips, just different words. Hey, don't harm yourself. I see you. You feel like no one sees you. I see you. And that was, what I needed to hear to go. And I felt the right conviction of, man, my mom's been looking for me, calling me for a year and a half, and I hadn't responded. And I know she wanted me to quit. I know she wanted me to come home, but ultimately my mom just wanted to know that I was okay.
Yeah.
So I called her, and, being a good Southern mama, she chewed me out when I called her. Because the reality is, to this day, it's creeping up on 50 people who have died of suicide or overdose, regarding not just people in the industry, people that I knew personally. People who were in the industry with me, people who should be in their late 30s or early 40s, that should be alive and doing great things, or at the climbing towards the pinnacle of their career, but they're dead. And that's something that my mom knew that was happening. There was an HIV outbreak, and industry was shut down. It was it was on the news and stuff, and she knew that was part of my life, yet she didn't know if I was okay. So I call her, and she chews me out, and then she says, hey, I'll always love you. You'll always be my son. But again, you're better than the way you are living. Yeah. Please come home. And I did. I quit the industry that day, and I came home. But what I brought with me was all the brokenness, all the baggage. And then I spent 2 years trying to build up another kingdom for myself in the health and fitness industry. The way I like to describe it is I tried to put enough good dirt on my bad dirt so I didn't look dirty. I tried to outweigh the reality of my past with accomplishments of today, and found a great mentor, got a lot of credentials, and all of a sudden I found myself to be very successful in the health and fitness industry. And in the middle of that, about 2 years into that, I met this girl, and I asked her out to dinner. She said no. Coffee, no. Movie, no. Pretty much anything I could think of, the answer was no. And then finally, I think she got tired of me asking, and she was like, hey, I go for this long run before I go to church. You can meet me, at this park if you want to. And I was like, I'll take whatever I can get. And I meet her on this run, and I begin to think, as I get there a little bit earlier than her, I begin to think, I'm like, man, she's different. She doesn't come to the parties when, the few people at the gym, when we hang out together, she doesn't come to those. She's different. She's just a different type of girl, and she probably doesn't know my backstory. And I'm like, man, she wouldn't be here if she knew me. I was like, I got to break it to her, And before the run really started, I was just like, hey, I just want to tell you up front, I'm this kid that his daddy didn't want. And because my daddy didn't want me, that led to me trying to overcome that through a ton of different things. And one of those things is that I did a ton of pornography over 6 years, and it's shameful and it hurts me, and it's still on the internet for the world to see, and I probably will always be there. This is who I am. And obviously she was pretty taken back by what I said. And then we just walked in silence. It was probably 5 minutes, but it felt like 2 hours, And I was just waiting on her to say, hey, why don't you just head on back home? Right. Or I don't know, maybe punch me in the throat. I don't and then so she was elementary school teacher. So, just the demeanor of a teacher, it's when they go from playful to serious, it's and then she was kind of squared up and looked at me, and she's like, hey, I don't want to minimize what you've been through. I don't want to even try to speak to the relationship that you have or don't have with your dad. I can't imagine that. But I do want to say this. You're not defined by the worst thing you've ever done. And you won't be defined by the greatest thing you'll ever do, because you're not the author of you. God is. Do you know him? And I wanted to say yes. I wanted to lie. Because I'd spent my whole life believing that I wasn't good enough. So I call it the first date mask. It's like, I don't know who I am. I don't think I'm worth much, but I'm really good at pretending to be whoever I think you want me to be, so that I can get some words of affirmation, or maybe I'll get you to like me. But if you really knew me, you would want nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do that in that moment, but I couldn't. I didn't know what to say. And she was just like, well, I've been following Jesus since I was in 7th grade. I'm not perfect by any means, but he's the foundation from which I live my life. What kind of food do you like? I was like, what? What do you mean? And she was like asking about my goals and dreams and aspirations and my family. And I'm just like, you don't want me to leave? Like, what?
You're like, at what point are you going to tell me that, hey, by the way, we don't ever need to see each other?
Yeah. I mean, I was certain that's what was coming. And, when I think about Colossians 4, like when Paul is talking about, let my speech be, seasoned with salt, and gracious and seasoned with salt, so he might know how to answer each person. Just like, man, she gave me, a tablespoon of grace and a tablespoon of truth. But she did it in a way that it both captivated me and it made me curious. Specific in that, like, she just confronted everything I thought to be most true. I thought that certainly my identity was made up of the things that I had done and the things that I lacked. And she offered a better story. And I was just like, man, could that be true? And we walked and talked, and then we left and text like high schoolers, for a week or so. And then she invited me to church. And then when I got to church, I wasn't sure about church, but I certainly wanted to be wherever she was. And I walk into church, and the pastor is preaching this message on 2 Samuel chapter 9 and talking about this dynamic between David, Ziba, and Mephibosheth, and how David, while Mephibosheth thought because his grandfather was Saul and his father was Jonathan, that his destiny was death, and that's why he was hiding in Lodabar. And David, he's introspectively asking himself, is there anyone left out of the house of Saul? Is there a way that I can show God's loving kindness to his people? He had just rebuilt the temple. And then he remembers this covenantal promise with Jonathan, and he asks, is there anyone left out of the house of Saul? They find Mephibosheth, bring him before him, and Mephibosheth thinks like, okay, it's doomsday. And Paul and David was like, hey, I'm actually going to give you back your grandfather's land, not just any land, part of Canaan and part of the promised land. And I'm going to invite you into my kingdom, and I'm going to give you a seat at my table forever. And it's like thinking of like, you think you're going to die, and then someone gives you, a really great picture of grace, this unmerited favor that we don't deserve. But like, just thinking about like trying to put ourselves in that story of when we thought that our demise was inevitable, and then someone like did something extraordinarily kind for us, you would think that your response would be, thank you so much. Like, wow, this is incredible. His response is essentially, don't you know who I am? What would you want with a dead dog like me? And I thought, yes, because this grace stuff sounds amazing. This Jesus person sounds incredible. And whoever, he's inviting into his kingdom, that's great for them. But don't you know who I am? My own father didn't want me.
Yeah, that applies to everybody but me.
Yeah. And we do it so often, even on the side of the believer. We try to believe that we have outsinned the grace of God, and we take our sin and we put it on a scale, and it weighs in our minds to be so much more important than what Jesus did on the cross. And I just resonated with that so much. And then he went from there to Hebrews 12:2 and talked about the joy, this joy that Jesus was experiencing as he endured the cross, scoring our shame. And it just, in that, God revealed to me that, really a picture of Romans 5:8 of times in my life where I was rebelling against him and people in my life did die, yet he chose to protect me. And I began to realize that the gospel was good news for me too. And that the Father that I've always wanted, he's not just waiting on me. He had been protecting me since I was born.
Yeah.
And I surrendered my life to Jesus and made him my Lord and my Savior. And pretty cool that girl's name is Hope. That's a really great name for someone that points you to hope. And she's been my wife for 9 years, and we've got 4 sons. And when I think about Ephesians 3:20, it's like I did not have the guts to even hope, ask, or dream or imagine anything that I have today. I would have never had the guts to not even imagine it in my brain. Just I just thought, no way, no way. I've gone too far. I've done too much. But that's grace in a nutshell. Yeah. And I just love that, from that moment, I had a coach for shooting, had a coach for acting, had a coach for runway, had a coach for all this stuff. And when I gave my life to Jesus, I was like, I go to this church in my head, I need a coach. I need to, what does it look like to follow Jesus? I want to be the best. I want to be good at this. How can I be, it talks about this, ambassador for Christ. Like, how can I do, what do I need to do? And this man, Andrew, he had recently graduated from Dallas Theological Seminary, and he was on staff at this church in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he said, hey, I was new on staff, had a ton to do. I was helping launch another campus. And when I met with you, I intended to give you a Bible, tell you to read the book of John, and get you plugged into a small group. But what happened instead was the Holy Spirit arrested me, and I was like, I've got to pour my life into this man. And we spent 15 to 20 hours a week together for a long time. And then, still to this day, we spend time together. He's actually over discipleship at Dallas Theological Seminary today. His name's Andrew Yates. But he's been a gift to me. And in 1 Thessalonians, it talks about how they didn't just teach the Bible to one another. They didn't just read the Word to one another. They shared their very own lives with one another. And he exhibited to me, what does it look like to follow Jesus? Like, what does it look like to be a dad when you're tired? What does it look like, to have a young family and to work long hours? What does it look like when, you have to correct someone that is a superior to you organizationally? What does it look like to defend, someone? What does it look like when the world pushes against you? Like, what's going to come out of you? Yeah. And that's his friendship and his mentorship has been one of the greatest gifts to me. But we spent several years together, and then I went to Liberty University, got a degree in Christian ministry, and stepped on staff at Life Church. And that was a highly administrative role. Did all the things: premarital counseling, funerals, weddings, pastoral care. Just served the best I knew how. And through that 5-6 years, I never held a microphone for the most part, and I love that until I ended up on Tucker Carlson. And someone shared my testimony and went kind of viral during COVID. And I ended up on Tucker Carlson, and he asked me, how did you go from, at this point, I was on staff as a teaching pastor at a small church in Iowa. He asked me, how did you go from being the top male porn star in the U.S. in 2012 to, 8-9 years later teaching the Bible? How does that?
It's a transformation.
Yeah, how does that make sense? And what I love is that, so we're live on Fox. This is when he had his primetime show on Fox. And he asked me that question, and I was like, Thank you for. I'm so glad you
Yeah.
asked because I literally walked them through Romans Road, and
Yeah.
no one stopped me. No one, there was no producer.
Everybody went to commercial.
Stop it, and
Right.
I think it was so unexpected, and I think again it was just a gift of God of Him. I went through significant counseling. I went through significant discipleship, and I love that God didn't give me the opportunity to say anything until I had something to say.
Yeah.
It's like that's what I tell people. It's like people that have testimonies like mine. It's like, man, it's like sit and soak. It's like your story will
Yeah.
always be powerful and useful, but man, allow God to give you the time to have something to say when when someone asks you, a reason for the hope that you have. When someone asks you for an apologetic,
Right.
I love that I had something to say because I've
Yeah.
been walking with Jesus for 6, 7 years at that point.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, but that conversation, it flipped my life on its head, and pretty much since that week, within about 3 or 4 months, I've been on the road speaking on a weekly basis. I speak at between 60 to 80. I do like 60 to 80 events a year, mostly Sundays or men's events, but I do a lot of advocacy for legislation. I'm on a few
Right.
boards at the White House around governing media and just navigating through the nuance that is sexual exploitation and sex trafficking
Right.
regarding digital. But I just love that like God is did all these things, and today I'm on staff at AACC, which is the largest Christian mental health organization in the world. They're unique in that they take they're clinically excellent, and they're distinctly Christian. And I think like it's just so important. It's where everything that they're sharing, even when it comes to neuroscience, even when it comes to mental health data, they're doing it all through the lens of what does the Bible say to be true.
Yeah.
And I love that I get to be on their executive team, and I lead
Yeah.
an initiative called Walk Worthy, and we're developing resources for the church around sexual ethics.
Yeah, and this being the month of August, big launch has been ongoing for that. You with the new podcast and that sort of thing. So tell everybody a little bit about that and how to access it, your website, and then I've got a couple of questions for you as we kind of bring this in for a landing.
Yeah, so you can find everything on my website. So it's Joshua Broome. There's an E on my last name, so Joshua Broome .me. So joshuabroome.me. You can find the podcast, all the resources. We've got a video series of because what we try to do. So we have a video series called the P51 Project. It's based on Psalm 51. But for someone saying, hey, how can I stop watching pornography? So it's me and two mental health professionals that are Christ focused. We answer the question, why is pornography bad? So that's the first question we have. Why is pornography a bad thing for you neurologically? And why is it detrimental to culture? And then we move into the theology of why is it why is it sin? So first we ask, regardless of your theological position, this is why it's not a good thing, and it's deteriorating culture, and it's bad for everyone, everywhere, no matter who you are, where you live, how old you are. But we start there, and then we get to can I live a life where this is no longer a struggle for me? Can I, someone who's living, someone who was addicted to porn 20, 30 years, can that person never watch porn again? The answer is yes.
So a couple of questions along that line. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you, first of all, I was going to say, let's start with the parents and grandparents that are listening. I'm a parent. I've got older and younger children, and, we as parents have tried, to always be careful that we do the best to filter and block and really protect that innocence. But as a parent, I think sometimes, especially if you're sometimes a little bit of that whole generation gap comes into play. And as a parent, you want to be vigilant and you want to be aware of things. But what are some things that you would say to parents to watch for or to do if you've got, children in the home, clear into their teens, that would be good for them to implement or be looking at?
Yeah, I would say just we live in a day and age where like if you have a smart device, it needs to be locked down. It needs to have some kind of it at very minimum, like on all your phones and your iPad and stuff like that. You can go to I think it's screen time, and you can turn on a setting where you're essentially blocking any and all adult content. Because I mean, the data tells us this: 3 years ago, average age of exposure was 11, and today it's 8 years old. And the reason it's gone from 11 to 8 years old because generally the first time exposure was happening on cell phones, but now because the implementation of iPads and other digital devices regarding homeschool and just in public school as well. Well, 84% of kids 12 and under who were exposed for the first time, it happens on an unprotected device outside of the home, or they have, a buddy show it to them. So they're not looking for it, it's looking for them. And the reality is, age of 13 and under, 93% of kids who are little boys have seen it. 70% of girls, 13, and, that's 13, 70% of girls, they've seen it. So it's not that, I hope they're not going to see it. Well, they're going to see it. And what I mean by that is pornography is not a new thing. It was etched on caves in Mesopotamia 2,000 years ago. That's why, Corinth, Ephesus, these were ports. There were cultural melting pots where sex was at the center and it was worshipped. And that's certainly the case today, specifically in the United States. Sex is worship. That's why my story is it's both, it's interesting, but it's for such a time as this, in that sex is something that people are talking about every day in some way, shape, or form. So what are we to do? Well, when we don't say something, that says something. Because when we don't prepare our kids for something that they're probably going to encounter, where I would say pretty much guaranteed to encounter in some capacity, when we don't prepare their minds to handle and to wrestle and to bring that to a conversation. Well, shame, what does it do? We see that in Genesis. We're going to hide, we're going to cover up, and they're certainly not going to bring it to you. That's why I love simple books like Good Book, Bad Pictures. It's for 4 to 7-year-olds. And it says, hey, in this world, there are books, videos, and places that have pictures of private parts, and private parts are not bad, but they're meant to be private. And if you see those, in the same way that if you're hurt, what do? You come to mom and dad. If you're scared, what do? You come to mom and dad. If you see a picture that you know that is not good, you are not bad. You are not in trouble, but please come to me and let's have a conversation about that. And if you don't create a safe place for conversations like that, they're not going to happen. And Romans 12 talks about this. We're either going to be conformed by the world or be transformed by the renewing of our mind. So, and what I tell parents all the time is when you don't tell them about this stuff and then they see it and then you have that very uncomfortable conversation and you're stressing about how it's such a big deal. Well, you have to answer 2 questions. If it was such a big deal, why didn't you tell me? And why is what you're telling me different than what I heard first?
Right. Yeah, it's like we with my youngest son, at school and different things, he'll come home and say, I think I heard a bad word. I think I know a bad word. And what we've tried to do is to not go, oh my gosh, and freak out, and make him feel like, oh, don't you ever say that again. Yeah. I think that previous generations kind of did that. I mean, I think when I was a kid, I kind of got yelled at for, I know it was a swear word. Yeah. But what I told him was, and I hope I did it right. You're the one in the with the AACC. So, but I just said to him, I said, we don't say that because, men who love Jesus, we don't talk like that. Yeah. And it makes us sound dumb, and he's like, oh yeah, it does. It's like, yeah, we're men, because, when you're a little boy, and I know you've got all these sons, they want to make their dad proud. They want to look up to him, and you talk about not having a dad growing up. Now God has given you 4 sons to
Yeah.
teach the proper way to. I love that. But it's, we don't do that.
Yeah.
And because we're men, we love Jesus, and we don't talk like that.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's so important as parents to really be vigilant. Now let's go to the other side of it. What if you're a man watching, or a woman, because we know this has become, even the statistics have gone through the roof with women watching adult content, pornography. What do you say to someone that's like, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Like I can't, like you said, it looks for me. It hunts me down.
Yeah.
How do I get out of this pattern? I've put blocks on my phone. I've, turned off all the cable TV, but what are the things that I can do to help me not just renew my mind, but to really find a pathway out of this addiction?
Yeah. I mean, just to kind of double tap on what you said previously, it's like, at the end of the day, kids, what they catch, it's not taught, it's caught. And
Yep.
they learn how to love through example, and they treat one another how I treat my wife. And they treat, they treat my wife, and they treat me how they see my wife and I engage with one another or engage with other people. My kids run to me at the door when I get home because they watch their mom do that. So I would just say, at the end of the day, man, when you blow it, like the greatest example, like when you get frustrated and you say something you shouldn't have said, or you react in a way that wasn't good, or maybe I speak to my wife in a way that I should not have. You have to show them, hey, this is what a man does. When a man makes mistakes, how do we know what a mistake is? It's something that doesn't line up with God's word. So number one, we got to know God's word. And number two, what a man does is he owns his mistakes and he apologizes fast. We don't pout about it. We don't apologize a million times. We own our mistake and we say that we're sorry, and we do it we're serious, and we look that person in the eye and say, hey, I should have not done that. Will you please forgive me? Yeah. And I think that's it. And then regarding someone struggling that, this is kind of my sweet spot. So this is the place that I live. I get about 2,000 people a month reaching out to me saying, I love Jesus, but I'm struggling with porn. So what do I do? What I've found is that if you find yourself in habitual sin, more often than not, you might be surrounded by people who know you, but no one is really close to you. And more often than not, you don't have a close friend. You don't have someone that'll call you out and call you up. You might have someone that'll celebrate with you, or you might have someone to give you a kick in the butt, but you don't have someone close enough to do both with you. And you really need that. I say everyone needs a Proverbs 27:6 friend. The wounds of a friend. I have a buddy, Andrew. He's a senior pastor of a church, Royal City in Inglewood, California. He's one of my best friends in the world, and he loves me enough to say things that sting, but I need to hear them. And so first and foremost, hey, you can only be as free as you're willing to be honest. So if you're struggling with that, you need to tell someone. And I would say also the depth of your confession is going to equate to the level of your healing. And what I mean, to be clear, a confession of, hey man, I looked at that website again. I know I shouldn't have. Will you pray for me? Like that, God will honor that. But that's different of, hey man, last night, I was trying to resist and I gave in, and this is the website that I went to. This is what I put in the search bar. I masturbated. I felt terrible about it. And then I woke up in the middle of the night and I did it all over again. I'm sick of it. And I just want to tell you, man, I need you to know that. And I want to make a plan. I want to make a commitment. I want to make a covenant right now, right here. It's like, I keep going back to it over and over again. I'm done. And it's like, that's different. Like that is a different confession. Like that's the confession.
That's really giving the keys of the accountability to that friend to say, okay, I'm saying to you, help me. I think in a lot of ways, growing up, I knew people that, they dealt with like cigarette addiction or alcohol, and it was like, don't let me drive to the bar. Smack the pack out of my hands. I give you permission, and I'm going to be mad at you when you do it. But help me. And I think that, our culture, we've demasculinized men, we've created this environment where it's wrong for men to be bros and to talk to each other and to hold each other accountable. The mentor protege relationship seems like it's just, something that a lot of people just kind of go, we keep our feelings internal. We don't really talk about these things. And that is, Jesus said, confess your sins one to another. He didn't just say, he didn't mean go walking around and telling
people. And I think that's where I find most people are. Most people that would identify as Christians, you've confessed your sin unto God. 1 John, you confess your sin unto God and you've been forgiven. But Jesus says, talking about James 5:16, confess your sins unto one another so that a righteous man can pray for you so that you can be healed. So some people are forgiven, but you're not healed. And if you're not healed, you're still wounded. And that wound is going to continue to fester. And that wound is going to cause you to keep going back to that place that you said you never go to over and over again. Because you might have said, I'm sorry to Jesus, but repentance is a logistical terminology, meaning this 180-degree turn. Yep. You're turning your back to the thing that is going against God's will, and you're moving from that sin and towards God. That's the difference between David and Joseph. David, he wasn't where he was supposed to be. He saw something he should not have seen, and then he looked again, and then he did something he shouldn't have done. And then what did he do? In the same way that we would delete our browser history, he deleted Uriah. He sent him into battle to be killed so he could cover up his sin. And then he had a friend that loved him enough. He got a word from the Lord. Nathanael came up to him and said, hey, you know what you did? You need to repent unto God. And that's where you see Psalm 51, and he's weeping before God. And he's saying, forgive me, God. Cleanse me of my iniquities. Forgive my sin.
He owned it.
He owned it. So if you're wrestling with habitual sin, if you're wrestling with pornography, what do? I need to confess it with clarity to someone who loves Jesus. And then I need to take inventory, because more often than not, it's not that you're watching it, it's why you're watching it. Mm-hmm. And it's in the confession, because when I'm clear with my confession, if I have someone close enough to me that I can do this, because the type of porn that I'm watching actually points to the type of wound that I have. Mm. Because porn is actually just a Band-Aid for something else. Like Band-Aid, like the pornography is problematic in my life, but the porn is actually a byproduct of something else. There's something that I have suppressed. There's something that I haven't dealt with, that I haven't processed. There's something in my life that I thought porn was the answer for my problem, and now I just have another problem. So I have to confess that, and then I need to get to the root of the problem, and then I need to create, some boundaries in my life. Craig Rochelle talks about how, if it's important, you'll make a way. If it's not, you'll make an excuse. So how important is it to you? Like, is it
you really want to be free of that, right? You want to feel that, go back to that over and over.
Yeah. So it would be inconvenient for me to have a flip phone. Well, is it worth your marriage? Is it worth diminishing your witness toward your kids? Is it worth your job? Is it worth your calling? Is it worth your life? So how far are you willing to go? Because here's the reality. If you have been watching porn for 10, 15 years, if you believe that you can, say, like, well, God can do anything. God can do anything. But if you believe that you can read, a 5-day Bible plan, or show up to one group, or do one thing, mm-hmm. and you can erode a 10, 15-year problem that you could, if someone put your brain on a CT scan, they would see the evidence of your behavior on a CT scan, that the ruts are that deep mm-hmm. in your mind. You think you can get rid of that rut? Like, yes, neuroplasticity is a thing. You can change the pathways in your brain. You can change them, but you can change them over time. And ultimately you have to, if you think about a field, like a big field you would drive like an ATV through. Well, the path that you would always take, there's ruts, you could look and you could see it. Well, if I'm going to create another path, it's going to take time, because it's going to be so much easier to go back to the path that's already established. but I'm going to be committed to creating another path, and that's going to take time. That's why you need people and you need time. So it's like, what's the secret sauce? Long obedience in the same direction. Long obedience in the same direction. What do I do? Just do the next right thing. So whenever I feel tempted, we don't want to be like David.
Your next right decision. Yep.
I want to be like Joseph. So what did Joseph do? Well, he had God's word embedded in his heart, and Potiphar's wife tried to tempt him, and he ran. The Bible tells us clearly, do not fight sexual temptation. Flee from sexual temptation. Don't fight it. Flee from it. You can be the baddest dude in the world, but you can't fight sexual temptation. You need to flee from it. And it's also important, where do you run to? Because if you're like me, I overcame lust, and all of a sudden I found myself wrestling with anger. And it was like, man, don't run from one sin to another. Like, find healing from that thing. You got to run to the right source. You got to run to God. That's where Joseph was running. So for me, it looked like for me personally, I needed to go to some Christian counseling. I needed to get plugged into a church where I had one-on-one discipleship, and I also had a small group. So I had one-on-one discipleship weekly. Bi-weekly, I met in a small group and met in a mid-sized group monthly. And I wanted to be known. I wanted to drag myself into the light because wherever the light is, darkness can't exist. So confess, create some accountability, whatever you need to do, put covenant eyes, whatever you need to have. But again, accountability only works if you do. So you've got to make the decision. I want to be free of this. I'm going to live in integrity. I think the secret sauce, man, it really is like Psalm 84. It talks about God will withhold no good thing for those who live in integrity, or those who walk in integrity. God will withhold no good thing. And it's like again, just do the next right thing. Not in just that area, because any compromise in your life will lead to compromise in every area of your life. And it was, everyone that's ever had an affair, well, it started with they saw something they shouldn't have seen, and then they had a conversation they shouldn't have had, and then they had a DM was sent that should have been sent, a gaze lasted a little too long. Then all of a sudden they end up doing this thing. They said, I would never do that. Well, the breadcrumbs lead back to this place where I was doing something that seemed simple, but it was an invitation for Satan to have a stronghold in your mind, and all of a sudden you're held captive. So how was the answer of that? Man, 2 Corinthians 10:5 talks about take every thought captive, make it obedient to Christ. It's military language. It's saying that your job is to seize the thought and take the thought to the captain. You don't deal with the thought. You're not the captain. God is. So I'm going to capture the thought. I'm going to bring it to the captain, and the captain's word tells me how to live, how to act, how to respond. And I just do that over and over and over again. What I will find is all of a sudden I'm 5 years down the road and I'm thinking differently. I'm living differently because I've actually transformed my life, because I've changed the way that I see people, because my heart has been transformed. I don't need behavior modification. I need heart transformation. So that comes from doing the right thing, being embedded in God's word, communing with God, talking with God, and being surrendered and submitted to his word, and doing that for a long time. And if you do that for a long time, your life will change. And all of a sudden, you'll find yourself not desiring the things that you used to desire. Like they still might look enticing to you, but you know the cost. And because you know the cost, you know the weight. And because you know the weight, what weighs on you most is what Jesus did on the cross, and that will allow you to make the right decision.
You hit on something I was going to ask you about is, this concept of when you do the right thing, you make that next right decision, it's not all on us. I think sometimes as Christians, we get caught up in this thinking that, well, God's over here waiting for me to do all these things, and then, then something will change in my life. But the truth is, if you take that one step, he's going to take two.
Yeah.
He's going to reward that. The law of sowing and reaping is so true. If you're doing the right things and you're like, God, I got the right heart, I'm trying to do this, he's going to meet you. He doesn't expect you as the prodigal son's father, right? He's
Exactly.
staying at the house. He go, well, hurry up and get up here. No, he ran to meet him
Yeah. I mean,
because
that's,
his son was coming home, and
yeah.
he's like, I'm going to meet you where you're at, but because of that, you take that step. He's willing, and then he starts laying those things out. And you mentioned, you're. I want to ask you about this because this is kind of what it made me think of is, you being kind of a health guy, and all that. You know how it is when you like eat really clean and well for a while,
Yeah.
and then when you're at a party, and somebody's got like a tray of cookies, and you're like you don't. Whereas maybe a year before you're like, I'd have eaten 3.
Yeah. And
Right?
what's even more,
There's something in you that you're like, oh no, I just I don't want that donut.
and what's even more wild about that, let's say that you do succumb to your temptation and you eat the donuts. What happens? Your stomach's all jacked up because your body is now acclimated to what health actually feels like.
Right.
It's not that, oh well, it's like I hear this from people all the time. Like they start eating clean and they have a cheat day and their stomach's wrecked. They're like, oh, this used to not bother me. It's like, well, you acclimated to feeling what sick felt like, and all of a sudden you experience wellness, and then you drug your body back to this thing.
Right. I'm not a fan of the cheat day. I think that the whole thing's just a lifestyle.
Yeah. It's like
it's 7 days a week, and I think that when it comes to men walking in the reality of what God wants for them, you don't have to create this false self of how you navigate your life, because Jesus wants you to be all that you can be.
Yeah.
And he's got this plan. Like in your case, like you said, he lets you get to that rock bottom, but it's because all that you had gone through, now you have a place where you can really connect and help men that are, dealing with the shame. They don't know a way out. I mean, 2,000 people, that's amazing that you hear from 2,000 people a month.
Yeah. I mean,
that help.
It's wild. It's like, I mean, and then every time it's wild because, I spoke in last weekend. I preached at a men's conference on Saturday, and then service on Sunday in Evansville, Indiana, and altars full of people. And it's like I was talking about sexual sin, but the reality was probably half the people at the altar. What were they saying? Man, I didn't have a dad. Or my dad was, my dad's dad, like my grandfather wasn't the greatest dad to my dad. And my dad, he made it his life mission to, make sure we had a big house and we had lots of toys and lots of gifts and lots of, fun travel things. And even though he was always around, I feel like he never saw me. And that was the people at the altar. They were saying, man, I have this wound from my earthly father and I superimpose it onto my godly father. And I feel like, I don't see the prodigal son. I don't see that father. I see a father on the porch waving his finger or having his back turned to me. And it's just, it's so countercultural to see, the God, the prodigal son's father, like standing on the porch. You take one step towards him, he runs towards you, and he puts a sandal on your foot, a ring on your finger, a robe on your back, and throws a party. This is my son who's come home. Like that's right. God's heart for you. And when people really get that, like it breaks down the walls that that Satan has really placed in them, the strongholds that they place in them, where it doesn't allow them to experience the love of the Father in the way that they desperately need it. And if I get to play a small part into just painting a picture of who God actually is and inviting people into that, praise God. But yeah, man, it's like Ephesians 2:10, like that's true for everybody. Like we're all saved from something for something. And God loves us so much that he predestined things for us to walk in, that there's gifts and talents that are available into each and every person. And if you live in those, in those gifts, in those talents, in that calling, in that place and purpose that he created for you to live in, the discontentment and, the wondering of what I'm supposed to do, who am I supposed to be? when you're living in, not in the perfect plan, but in the, in the will of God, meaning that you're seeking Him and you're living out what He's called you to do. You're actually, you're not experiencing the emotional feelings. You're actually fulfilled. That's why Jesus calls Himself the bread of life, the water that never leaves you thirsty, because He and He alone can not only sustain you, but He can satiate you. And because it's Him at the end of the day that our heart's longing for most.
Yeah, he, I feel like that he's really doing a great revival with men. I feel like that he's calling men to, we've had this season in our culture where I think that, and not just the demasculinization, like I said, but really devaluing the value of fathers and the values of men in our society to stand up and say, right is right, wrong is wrong. We're not going to do this. This is the way we do it. I was at a store one day, and there was some young teen boys, and one of the kids was with me, and a couple of them got to swearing, and I said, "Oh, whoa, little ears." And I don't think a man had ever said to them, "You don't talk." And they're like, "Oh, okay, sir."
Yeah.
I mean, it could have got chippy, right? But it was like, no, I'm not going to go, okay, well, don't listen to them, son. No, we're not going to act like this. Let's not do that. And I think that he's calling for men to rise up and be the men and fathers, but also to be the mentors to other men who are saying, I know I'm not living the best life. I know I'm not in my calling, but I don't know how to get from here to there. And I need someone to help me, because I think that as men, John Eldredge talks about, we've all got this battle to fight, the beauty to rescue. And, the reality is that deep within the heart of a man is this desire for this adventure, to not feel like you're living safely. God didn't call us to live a life that's safe. He called us to live a life that's sent, because He has a mission for us. So before we get out of here, I have one more question. I love that we've had this time. Real quick, if the listener is not a man, a wife is listening, a girlfriend, a mother, what would you say to them if they're living in a situation where they have a loved one, a boy or a man that they're praying for, and they want to see them, find a pathway out of addiction like this?
Yeah, man, I would say intercessory prayer is something that we so overlook. It's like I had the opportunity to be gifted my grandmother's Bible after she passed away, and in that Bible was prayers specifically to me. It was when I was living in Hollywood, making a mess of my life. And her prayers to me were not that I would stop what I was doing. It wasn't that I would come home. It was that I would have a radical encounter and come to know the person of Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And that was, 10, 15 years before I gave my life to Christ. So I would just say that praying that intercessory prayer for them. And also, like, at the end of the day, it's like, I'll just speak objectively. It's like men, like, they need to be honored and know that they're respected. And it's like, it's like, touch and all this stuff. But man, if you make that man like the champion of his home, and yes, like, at the end of the day, it's like, Ephesians 5 talks about like how women are, to submit to their husbands. Well, at the end of the day, what's even more true is that if speaking to husbands, if that husband's not submitted to the person of Jesus, then you're not worthy of submission. So that's true. But also, if you continue reading, where the women are called to submit to their husbands, the husband's called to die. The husband's called to die as Jesus is died for the church. So I would just say, man, if we can get to a place where it's not, it's not anything elaborate, but if men can feel honored and feel respected, if they're living in a way where, they're deserving of honor and they're deserving of submission. If you go out of your way to grab them by their shoulders and look them in the eye and say, "Hey, I'm proud of you," because they'll never ask for it, but I promise you they need to hear it. I'm proud of you. Thank you for being, a man's called to be a priest, a protector, a provider.
Mm-hmm.
He's called to do all these things, but just acknowledging those things that he's deserving of honor, that he's deserving of respect, and that you're proud of him. That will do more for him and compel him to do things that are seemingly impossible, because that's the gasoline that he needs on his tank.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, to someone who maybe you're dealing with a level of infidelity, and you're wrestling through, like, how can we make this right? Man, if that stuff's going to be really difficult, and we're all called to forgive, but forgiveness doesn't always equate to restoration. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you don't set boundaries. Forgiveness doesn't mean you forget, but you are called to forgive, because a lack of forgiveness, real forgiveness, is going to equate to bitterness, and that bitterness is going to hurt you and hurt them, and there's never going to be resolve there. But at the end of the day, man, when a man confesses openly, not when he's called, if he
Right.
openly confesses to you that he's wrestling with this, or maybe he's not even wrestling anymore, it's part of his story, he's overcome it. If he brings that to you, know this: he's saying that to you because he loves you desperately. He's not trying to hurt you. He's not trying to offend you. He's being vulnerable. And in the same way, like when our kids bring to us something vulnerable, like how we react to their vulnerability is so important. Because if my son tells me something that he feels uncomfortable about and I freak out,
Yeah.
I'm amplifying the shame that he already feels,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm probably cutting off that communication. He's probably not going to bring me that, any kind of feelings like that ever again. But
Right.
if I sit and I listen, I love, it's not mine, but, I've heard it said, and then as I always say, it's like before you have conversations like that, like if you feel overwhelmed, just take a second, and it's like I just try to pause, pray, and ponder.
Yeah.
Pause, pray, and ponder, because that way it's like I can give an answer that's not in the moment, not with me being overwhelmed. It's the Holy Spirit in me is equipping me to say something and be something that's greater than anything that I could ever do on my own. So I mean, that's what I would just say, like to someone that has a man that's confessed, either past or current, regarding pornography. Find a way, not to condone it, but find a way to receive that in a way where he's telling you, if he hadn't been caught, if he's telling you, he's openly giving you this information,
Mm-hmm.
he wants to be free. He loves you desperately, and he doesn't want to stay where he is.
Yeah.
So I would just say, that's a nuanced thing to say, but I think, like, Satan's plan is to ruin your marriage. Is to corrupt the culture, to destroy the home. And
Right.
if the Holy Spirit convicts the man to the extent where he has the relational equity and the trust with you and the love for you to say, hey, this is difficult, but I want you to know this, and I'm telling you this not because I have to, because I want to, because I don't want to stay stuck that way. How you respond to that is going to be the thing that's either catalytic of him doubling down, or maybe he's free forever.
Yeah. So good. I want to remind everybody Joshua's website, joshuabroome.me, and please make yourself available to that if you know somebody that is in that struggle, to get those resources. And is your schedule there? Like if people want to come see you speak, how would they
I'm
follow you
terrible.
on social?
Yeah. I try to do like a monthly thing, and
Okay.
it's just like, yeah, I could do much better at that.
You got a lot going.
Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhere every week,
Yeah.
but yeah,
That's why today when we started, I asked you, I said, so where are you today? And you're like,
yeah,
I'm at home in Texas. I'm like, wow,
yeah, I'm at
that's
home,
great.
but yeah, so I'm doing, so I'll be at Summit Ministries has essentially an apologetic camp for 9th through 12th graders. I'll be there the 3rd through the 15th. Then I'm preaching at Lifegate in Denver on the 17th. I'll be in Amarillo the next weekend, and then New York the next weekend, and then on and on it goes. So,
Love it.
yeah.
Well, we want to just thank you for coming on and taking the time to just have a really just great sit down conversation. And I really believe it's going to help some people. I think it's going to. My hope is that somebody shares this with somebody, they hear this, and it really starts something in them, and they find that freedom, or they have a spouse or a brother or a son that finds that freedom. And so I appreciate all of your time that you've taken, and we are praying for your ministry and what God is doing, and excited to see what the rest of 2025 has to hold. For sure. And
Yes, sir.
who knows, maybe we'll see you on Tucker Carlson again, you know?
Yeah, that would be cool. That'd be cool. We were. I was just in Maine, so I saw him pretty recently. But yeah, that would be
That's
neat.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Joshua. And we'll see you down the road. And in the show notes, everybody got the information on him and his ministry. And be sure you share this podcast with somebody. Go online, share it, follow us on whatever podcast platform you prefer. You can hit the bell on YouTube and you get those updates as well. And we appreciate you, Josh, and we hope you have a good rest of your week. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us on the podcast.
All right, brother. Thank you so much.